Only the cannons were firing now, Michael realized as he tried to get his lungs working again. He could still hear the blood-curdling yells of the rebels working their way up the hill. He rolled over onto his knee and glanced over the wall. They were within sight. It seemed to Michael that the Confederate army was about to step into his lap. Shoot, he thought. They're right here. Shoot. It felt like an eternity, but finally Michael heard Chamberlain call out the order. Hit 'em. A long, rolling crack of rifle fire rang out. It began near Michael and ran like a fuse up the line to the right. Scores of rebels fell on the first volley. The rebels were more careful after that, using trees to shield them from the deadly fire, but still they came. Chamberlain was directing his men and had moved some distance from Michael. A few of the rebels had reached the wall now, and most of the shooting was point blank. The colonel had drawn his pistol and continued to fire at targets all around him until, without warning, the rebels pulled back. As suddenly as they had appeared, they withdrew. Chamberlain's men cautiously stood up and took a look around. Michael walked quickly to the colonel, who was walking away from him. The rock wall was draped with the bodies of blue and gray. He passed a man who was crying and cursing as he held a younger man in his arms. Jogging to catch up with Chamberlain, Michael reached out and touched his shoulder. "Colonel," he said. Chamberlain stopped, staring straight ahead. "Colonel, I know you are very busy, and I don't want to bother you, but why am I here?" Chamberlain slowly shook his head. "I don't know. I only knew that you would come." "There is something I should learn from you," Michael pleaded. "Think, what could it be?" The colonel smiled slightly and raised his eyebrows. "I am fairly certain I have nothing you would care to learn. I am a teacher with a cause in my heart, and men to lead. These poor men, their leader has no real knowledge of warfare or tactics. I am only a stubborn man. That is my greatest advantage in this fight. I have deep within me the inability to do nothing. I may die today, but I will not die with a bullet in my back. I will not die in retreat. I am, at least, the Apostle Paul, who wrote, 'This one thing I do, I press toward the mark.'" "Do you have a note to give me?" Michael asked. For a second, Michael could see that Chamberlain did not understand his question. Then recognition flared in his eyes. "Yes," he said, "I do. I had almost forgotten." Digging into his pocket, he pulled out a small pouch. The pouch was hand-sized, navy blue, with 2 crossed swords, the symbol of a fighting man, embroidered on the flaps. It had been sewn from stout cloth, but the rough treatment it had received had worn the pouch to a moleskin softness. The 2 gold buttons that closed the flap were metal, engraved with an image of an eagle. The pouch was beaten and threadbare, but it was still handsome, regal in a sense, the possession of an officer. Chamberlain opened the pouch and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "I wrote this more than 2 months ago," he said, passing the paper to Michael. He said, "I'm a little bit foggy on what I actually wrote. I woke up in the middle of the night after one of those dreams. The words you have there were rumbling around in my head, as plain as day. I lit the lamp, found an inkwell, and put them to paper. I knew they were for you." "Thank you," Michael said, taking the paper in his hand. "My pleasure," Chamberlain replied. "All of this has been a very curious situation. By the way, how do you get out of here?" Michael held up the paper. "All I have to do is read this," he snapped his fingers, "and I'm gone." Chamberlain looked around him. Noticing several men approaching, he put his hand on Michael's shoulder, squeezed it, and said, "If that's all you have to do, then, brother, you might want to read it now." He began to leave, then looked at Michael. Still in his hand was a small canvas pouch. Holding it out, he offered it to Michael. Wordlessly, Michael took the gift and watched the colonel walk away. Everything in him wanted to take Chamberlain's advice. "Read the paper now," he told himself. "Get out of here." But something kept nudging him to stay, to watch. After placing the piece of paper back into his pouch, Michael shoved the whole thing in his jeans pocket and eased up to the group of men surrounding Colonel Chamberlain. "Tozier," Chamberlain called to a soldier who had a thick wad of torn cloth stuck into a hole in his shoulder where he had been wounded earlier while carrying the battle flag. "No help from the 83rd, Tozier growled. "They're shot to ribbons. All they can do is extend the line a little bit, and we're getting murdered on the flank." "Can we extend?" Chamberlain asked. "There's nothing to extend, sir," another man answered. "Over half our men are down." "How are we for ammunition?" "We've been shooting a lot." "I know we've been shooting a lot. I want to know how we're holding out." "I'll check, sir." As the man moved off, a voice came from a young soldier who had climbed a tree. "They're forming again, Colonel." Chamberlain looked up to see the boy pointing downhill. "They're forming up right now," he said, "and they've been reinforced. There's more of them this time." "Sir," an officer, out of breath, stumbled into their midst. "Colonel Chamberlain, sir. Sir, Colonel Vincent is dead." "Are you sure, Thomas?" Yes, sir. He was shot right at the first of the fight. We were firmed up by Weed's brigade in the front, but now Weed is dead. They moved Hazlett Battery up top. Hazlett's dead, too. The soldier who had gone to check ammunition came running back. Sir, he began, we're out. 1-2 rounds per man at the most. Some of the men have nothing at all. Chamberlain turned to a thin man standing to his right. Spear, he said calmly. Tell the boys to take ammunition from the wounded and the dead. Maybe we should think about pulling out, sir, Spear said cautiously. We will not be pulling out, Sergeant. Chamberlain replied grimly. Carry out my orders, please. Colonel, Tozier spoke up. Sir, we won't hold them against. You know we won't. Sir, the boy called from the tree. Here they come. Michael had been listening to the exchange between the officers, fascinated by the horror of their situation. But when he heard the rebels yell, coursing up through the trees once more, his blood turned icy cold. I've waited too late to read the paper, he thought. I'll never get out of here now. As he grabbed the pouch, a calm washed over him, and he felt the same urge. Wait, watch, listen, learn. Chamberlain was standing in full view on top of the wall, his arms closed, staring down at the advancing enemy. Sergeant Spear had returned, and was standing at the colonel's feet. Tozier and 2 other men were bunched below. Michael stood several feet behind the group. Sir, Tozier shouted, give an order. Chamberlain remained static. He walked away from the group of men, and Michael heard him speaking softly, in a firm, resolved voice. We can't retreat, he said to himself. We can't stay here. When I am faced with the choice of doing nothing or doing something, I will always choose to act. I am a person of action. Turning his back to the rebels, he looked down at his men. 6 bayonets, he called. At first no one moved. They simply stared at him with open mouths. We'll have the advantage of moving downhill, Chamberlain said. 5 bayonets, now. Execute a great right wheel of the entire regiment. Swing the left first. Sir, wait, what's a great giant wheel? One of the officers yelled, but the colonel had already jumped from the rocks. Tozier answered the question. He means to charge, Melker. A great right wheel is an all-out charge. Michael watched in awe as Chamberlain drew his sword, leaped up into the wall again, and shouted, Bayonets! Bayonets! Turning, the colonel pointed the sword directly at Michael and slightly bowed his head. Then, with a power born of righteousness and fear, the schoolteacher from Maine roared, Charge! 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 to his men, and they did. Tumbling over the wall, the men who were left raised their voices to meet the voice of their leader. Charge! They cried. Charge! Charge! Michael rushed to the wall and looked downhill. He was stunned to see the advancing Confederate force stop in its tracks. Almost immediately, the rebels turned and ran. A few of the braver souls emptied their rifles before dropping them to follow the rest. About 70 yards down the slope, Michael caught the sight of Chamberlain. He had his left hand on the trunk of a tree, and in his right he held the sword, the point of which was resting on the collarbone of a rebel officer. The man had his hands up. It was over. Michael climbed over the rocks and sat down. With his back to the wall, he pulled the pouch from his pocket. As he looked down the slope, Michael brushed his fingers over the silky smoothness of the material. Unbuttoning the flap, Michael removed the paper that Chamberlain had written. After taking a final glance downhill and a deep breath, Michael unfolded the paper. Third decision for success. I'm a person of action. Beginning today, I will create a new future by creating a new me. No longer will I dwell in a pit of despair, moaning over squandered time and lost opportunity. I can do nothing about my past. My future is immediate. I will grasp it with both hands and carry it with running feet. I will seize this moment. I choose now. I am a person of action. I am energetic. I move quickly. Knowing that laziness is a sin, I will create a habit of lively behavior. I will walk with a spring in my step and a smile on my face. Wealth and success hide from the sluggard, but rich rewards come to the person who moves quickly. I am a person of action. I inspire others in my activity. I am a leader. Leading is doing. To lead, I must move forward. Many people move out of the way for a person on the run. Others are caught up in its wake. My activity will create a wave of success for the people who follow. My activity will be consistent. This will instill confidence in my leadership. As a leader, I have the ability to encourage and inspire others to greatness. It is true, an army of sheep led by a lion would defeat an army of lions led by sheep. I am a person of action. I can make a decision. I can make it now. God has given me a healthy mind to gather and sort information, and the courage to come up to a conclusion. I am not a quivering dog, indecisive and fearful. I am a person of action. I am daring. I am courageous. Fear no longer has a place in my life. For too long, fear has outweighed my desire to go for the things I really want. Never again. I have exposed my fear as a vapor, an impostor that never had any power over me in the first place. I do not fear opinion, gossip, or the idle chatter of monkeys, for all are the same to me. I do not fear failure, for in my life, failure is a myth. Failure exists only for the person who quits. I do not quit. I am courageous. I am a leader. I seize this moment. I choose now. I am a person of action.